52 strangers picked up a telephone, spoke for exactly 10 minutes, and hung up changed. Not changed in mood. Changed in measurable, audible, replicable behavior. Independent judges, listening only to audio tracks, with no idea what the experiment was even testing, rated a specific group of women as warmer, more animated, more socially graceful than the rest. Same women, same voices, same species of small talk. The only variable was a belief held inside a stranger's head, a belief the women themselves never knew existed. Sit with that for a moment. A private thought held by someone else produced a public, verifiable shift in another person's actual behavior, not their mood, their conduct. Let that sit uncomfortably, because it should. This is the behavioral confirmation study conducted by Mark Snyder, Elizabeth Tanke, and Ellen Berscheid in 1977. And it did not set out to be unsettling. It set out to answer a narrower, colder question. Can a perceiver's false, private belief about a total stranger alter that stranger's real, observable behavior, without the stranger's knowledge, consent, or awareness that anything has been manipulated at all? Psychologists had circled this idea for decades. Robert Merton had named the self-fulfilling prophecy back in 1948. Charles Cooley, half a century earlier, had proposed that the self is built largely from the reflected appraisals of others, the looking-glass self, he called it. But naming a phenomenon is not the same as isolating it in a controlled setting, stripped of every confound, so that you can say with confidence, this, specifically, is what did it. Here is what they actually built. Male participants were shown a photograph before a phone conversation. A photograph fabricated by the researchers, either of a conventionally attractive woman or an unremarkable one. The man believed this photograph was of the woman he was about to speak with on the phone. It was not. It bore no relationship to her whatsoever. He then had a 10-minute unscripted conversation with her, believing he was speaking to whoever was in that photo. Afterward, only his side of the tape was analysed separately from hers. Then, and this is the critical isolation, only her side of the tape was extracted and handed to a new set of judges who had never seen any photograph, never heard the man's voice, and had no idea an attractiveness manipulation had ever taken place. They rated the women blind, and the women who had been believed, falsely, invisibly, to be attractive were rated by these blind judges as more confident, more animated, more sociable. The women had no possible access to the photograph. They could not have known what the man believed, and yet their actual behaviour, audible in tone and pacing and warmth, converged with a belief they never held about themselves. This does not stand alone. 9 years earlier, Robert Rosenthal and Lenore Jacobson had run a study inside an ordinary elementary school that produced a structurally identical result at a larger scale. Teachers were told that a randomly selected group of their students, chosen with no relationship to actual ability, were intellectual bloomers on the verge of an academic growth spurt. Nothing about these children was different. The selection was arbitrary. Yet by year's end, these students showed real, measured intelligence gains, in some cases 20 to 27 points on standardized testing, gains their randomly excluded classmates did not show. The teachers were not lying to the children. The teachers likely never said a single explicit word about intelligence. Something quieter was doing the work. That quieter thing is the mechanism, and it operates in a closed, self-reinforcing loop with no single villain and no conscious deception required. It begins with an expectation held privately by one person about another. That expectation does not stay locked inside their skull. It leaks out through micro-behaviours so small they rarely register consciously to either party. A warmer tone of voice, slightly more patience before interrupting, a fraction more eye contact, more follow-up questions, more attentiveness to the other person's words. The target of these micro-behaviours, the woman on the phone, the child in the classroom, does not perceive a manipulation. They perceive only that they are, in this specific interaction, being treated as interesting or capable or warm. And here is the pivot point where identity stops being a fixed internal object and reveals itself as something closer to a live feedback system. The target's self-concept recalibrates in real time to match the treatment they are receiving. If you are met with warmth, some part of the self quietly concludes that warmth is the appropriate register to return. If you are met with patience, you find yourself, without deciding to, becoming more articulate. That recalibrated self-concept then generates new behavior, genuinely felt as one's own. And that new behavior is precisely what confirms the original private belief the other person held. The loop closes. No one lied, no one designed it, and no one inside it can see the seam. This is not confined to laboratories. It runs quietly through ordinary rooms. A job interviewer who has already decided in the first 90 seconds that a candidate seems slightly out of their depth will unconsciously ask sharper, more testing questions, offer less warmth, less time to think, producing exactly the flustered response that confirms the original impression. A partner treated early in a relationship as the difficult one will, over months, generate real difficulty, not because they were secretly difficult all along, but because being met with defensiveness reliably produces defensiveness in return. An employee quietly filed under not leadership material will be handed fewer opportunities to lead, will therefore accumulate less visible leadership experience, will therefore continue to look, on paper and in meetings, exactly like someone who was never leadership material. And earlier still, in families, a child assigned the role of the sensitive one, or the difficult one, or the reliable one, will be treated according to that label for years, long enough that the resulting behavior calcifies and is later reported back to the person and by the person as simply who they have always been. The cost of this is not abstract. It is a career quietly bent by the private impression a manager formed in a single, unremarkable meeting. It is a relationship fossilized into a shape someone else decided it would take, years before either party could name what had happened. It is a self-concept substantially assembled, not entirely, but measurably, meaningfully, from the expectations other people silently projected onto you before you had any behavior of your own to offer in response. Most people experience this as discovery. They believe they are finding out, gradually, who they really are. The research suggests something colder and more precise. In real, quantifiable part, they are being told. You are, at this exact moment, listening to a narrator describe a mechanism and deciding how to hold your face, how skeptical or how convinced to appear, how attentive to seem, even alone, even unobserved. That posture was not fully yours. It was assigned to you by what you believed this video expected you to become while watching it.